stopped right now.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular council meeting for March the 15th. If you'll all please rise. Councilmember Russell Schneider is going to lead us in the invocation. I don't think Reverend Robertson is here. He'll do that. And then Shannon Mattingly will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Russell?
Let us pray. Dear most gracious and heavenly Father, we bow before you, just thanking you for how you bless us and how you take care of our city and take care of us personally. I pray that you'll just help us to keep self out of our decisions and that we would put you in the forefront of all of our decisions that we make today. I pray you protect those that are not as fortunate in dangerous conditions, and pray for those that protect our country. Pray you watch over us this day. Thank you for the weather. Thank you for the rain you sent us. I ask you just to be with us today and bless this time. It's in your Son's precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you very much for being at the regular council meeting for this day. First item on the agenda would normally be the opportunity for public comment. We have no one signed up to speak this evening. Individuals who normally would like to speak before the council would sign up prior to the meeting and would have up to 3 minutes to make their comments. We don't have any discussion or action based on those comments. Let me just take a second, though, during this section to just give a small report on a trip that the city manager and the council members I have on my right and left had the privilege of taking this past week. On Monday, the four of us got to go to Walter Reed Army Hospital, and we had some incredible visits. We got to visit with 5 soldiers, all suffering from various degrees of injuries they received in Iraq. Some missing part of their leg, others in apparatus that was there basically to hold their leg together, hoping it would heal enough that they didn't have to take their leg. And as we stood there and looked at those injuries, and we saw anything but injured soldiers. Their attitude, their outlook was phenomenal. 2 of the 3 that we really got to visit with for extended periods of time, they just wanted to get well so they could get back to their unit, and that was just amazing. It was an incredible opportunity to visit those soldiers at Walter Reed, and those are the kind of things that make us proud to be Americans, and proud that those young men and women are over there fighting for our freedom. So I just wanted to share that with you this evening and tell my fellow council members how proud I was to be there with them and in that setting. So thanks very much for taking the time to do that.
Well, I wanted to say that none of them had any wishes that we could grant. They had said they had everything they needed, and in spite of what we're all reading in the paper about the care at Walter Reed, they spoke only highly of it and said that they were being well taken care of. I was really glad to hear that.
Absolutely. Okay. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity to hear reports. The first one is a public hearing, and we will first receive a presentation from the Clean Temple Urban Transportation Study. We call it KTUTS, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, regarding the FY 2008 to 2011 Transportation Improvement Plan, and receive public comments on this plan. And I'll ask the Executive Director for the Planning Division for SITCOG, Shannon Mattingly, if she please come forward, and will you be introducing that?
I can.
Okay, will you do that? Okay.
I'm going to pawn off any hard questions on him, so I definitely will answer. Well, as the mayor just stated, Ed Kavoval with the Waco TxDOT District is here as well. I'm going to toss the tough questions to him.
All right, good. Well, welcome, Shannon. Thanks for being here.
And thank you for allowing us to be on your agenda. As most of you know, the Metropolitan Planning Organization is a transportation planning organization that looks at regional plans and does the regional planning for transportation projects throughout the Central Texas region. We cover a large portion of Bell County from Temple all the way over into Coryell County into Coppers Cove and a small portion of Lampasas County. And what the job of the MPO is to do is to look at long-range and short-range plans. We don't actually construct the projects and let the projects or acquire right-of-way or do engineering. What we do is we look at the projects, prioritize the projects, and determine the priority that projects need to be built within the region. And when I say we, that's done through two different bodies. We have a technical committee that is made up of staff members from all of the member cities, generally made up of planning directors, city managers, city engineers, public works directors, county engineers. And then we have a policy board that makes all of the final decisions. That is made up of elected officials from each of the cities. And I know you have two members, and then Colleen has two members. The mayor is our vice chair, and then Councilmember Schneider is also on our policy board. And what that policy board does is it makes the final recommendations for a 25-year plan and a 4-year plan. The 25-year plan is a metropolitan transportation plan where we look at all of the short range, long range, and then significant projects that we just don't have funding for, but we want to make sure that they're on a plan and recognized. And then we have what we're looking at tonight, which is your transportation improvement plan. This plan has always in the past been a 3-year plan. With the passage of safety law this past year, it has gone to a 4-year plan now, so that's why it's from 2008 to 2011. What we do with this plan is we prioritize all of the projects within the region. Temple actually has the largest amount of projects, and in your packets that you have, and there's also some packets on the table at the back as well, if there's any citizens that want a copy of it. It lists all of the projects that are within the Temple city limits. The main projects are US 190, Temple south from the city limits to 2 miles south of FM 436, which is widening roadway to 4 lanes with a depressed median. That then the second phase of that project is SH 95 in Temple to Temple south city limits. I'm not going to read all of the projects. IH 35, it's looking at installing overhead dynamic message signs. FM 2305 is looking at widening roads to 4 lanes with 2-way left turn lanes. We also are constructing an interchange at SH 317. Loop 363 is on here, which is constructing north frontage road to provide interim 4-lane divided highway. And then we have several projects on IH 35 looking at reconstructing and widening to 6 lanes and constructing frontage roads, as well as one project on SH 317 that actually goes from Temple into Belton, which is looking at widening that roadway to 4 lanes with a raised median. Although these projects are prioritized and are listed in 2008, 2009, 10, and 11, they are programmed, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that the funding will be available. And I say that because there's been significant funds cuts on the federal level, which has trickled down through the state. We're seeing a lot of that because of the increase in construction prices, gas prices, a multitude of things. And we just received a letter today saying that there is a possibility that the state is going to have to give back another large sum of unobligated money back to the federal government as well. So there's a hearing regarding that next Thursday before the Transportation Commission. We just got the letter today regarding that. So we continue to see significant cuts, but we're still programming and we're still working within a certain amount of funding that we're given by the state. And as I said, Ed is here from the Waco district, and we get all of the projects that they're looking at letting and what years they're looking at letting and how much the estimated costs are from them, and that's what we program into this TIP. And then we go before our policy board with a draft, go out for public hearing, take public comments, and then we go back before the policy board in April to approve the final document. So I'm going to stop, and if the council, mayor, council have any questions regarding any of the projects.
Thank you, Sharon. Council, questions that you have for Ms. Mattingly? Anything from Mr. Boble? He's with TxDOT and has quite a bit of knowledge and information about the projects as they're being developed in this area.
Shannon, the second cut for the same reasons as the first cut was.
Ed, do you know, I don't know that we've really gotten any specifics on
There's another rescission that has come down through Congress, approximately $290 million. And so, for the state of Texas, so what we have to do, now when I say we, but TxDOT has to decide what programs are we going to allow to be affected because of that rescission. Now, what I would do is encourage anyone from the council to go down to the public hearing and give comment to the commission on how you all feel on those rescissions, because they could have an effect on the projects. Not only it could have effect on projects that are like bridge structures, those types of things. Because what we did previously was stop the enhancement program because of those rescissions. Now, how this is going to affect the other programs, we're not sure yet. But again, I encourage you to, if you can, go down to the commission and give comment.
We have our KTUT's policy board meeting next Wednesday. Do you think we'll have any additional insight by that time as to what areas they might be looking at affecting with those cuts?
I can't tell you that. I don't know that at this time.
Okay.
I would just, when we meet next week, it's going to be certainly in issues that we have to look at Category 3 projects. But as far as the rescission and those kinds of comments for the appearance before the commission, I don't have any word on that.
And I can guarantee you there will be representation from this council at that meeting.
I believe that's a very good thing.
So is it still the same 7% for our NPO? I mean, out of that 200 and whatever 80 million you just said? I mean,
no, that's a different kind of a funding issue.
Okay.
The 7% that you're referring to really deals just with the Category 3 or the statewide mobility program that the NPO is discussing. So that the rescission of the new funds rescission of the funds that are going to be happening in the future, near future, could have an effect on the overall funding for any of our categories. Category statewide mobility, which is Category 3, Category 4, which is statewide connectivity, I-35, those types of things. So it could have an effect on that, or it could have an effect on the safety program. We really won't know the impact on that rescission until sometime after we have that meeting. The commission has that meeting. Then they'll receive comments, find out the issues, the concerns that the public has, and then go back and try and figure out what can we cut that'll be the least detriment to our transportation system.
So our plan, there's still plans going to be the same thing, the two plans we talked about, without a change?
Actually, that's why we're having a policy board meeting next week. Is they gave us a percentage that we needed to work within, and because we had to move some projects up on the Proposition 14, we're going to have to make some additional adjustments. We're about $5 million short on where we need to be, so we're not quite to Plan C, and I guess I probably should clarify what we're talking about. We have been in the process with the policy board of ranking our Category 3 funding projects. We saw some cuts, and so we had to go back in and reprioritize and rephase several of our projects. In the process of that, the policy board put together 3 separate plans that we agreed to take forward to a consensus meeting that we had at TxDOT a week ago. And so we went forward, we took our first plan. The plan was, we'll use the first plan. If that doesn't work, then we have a fallback. And if that one is still not enough cuts, then we have a third fallback. But this is our last resort. And the first plan kind of got pushed aside. We had to make some amendments. We were at the point of getting pretty close with the second plan. We just have to make a few more adjustments. We're not quite to Plan C cuts, but we're a little bit less than Plan B cuts. So that's what we're going to have to look at, is just still shifting some money. And we just found out about this yesterday. And so Ed and Reggie are working on some alternatives to bring forward to the policy board next week. So there might be a possibility. I don't think that we're going to actually delete any projects completely out, but we're going to be pushing some of them probably further back in funding years.
One point of clarification, the 7% that you're referring to is actually formula-based, so that won't change. Now, the amount of money that we get for Category 3, that could change.
And the commission meeting is next Thursday in Austin, 9 o'clock, I believe.
To the Grill Building.
I don't have
The
to.
Greer Building, yes, sir. It's at their normal location, open meeting, so get there early because it's not a big room.
Okay, great. Well, I know this requires a public hearing, so
Yes,
we're
sir.
going to go ahead and, if there are no more questions from the council for you, that you go ahead and call the public meeting to order. This item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on the TIP as presented for the 2008 to 2011 year, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments or asking questions, should you merely have questions of Hannon or Mr. Cloven. Any comments or questions from anyone? Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And that concludes this item. There's no action for the council. It's merely to conduct the public hearing. And thank you, Ed and Anna, for being here and conducting this public hearing.
Thank you for allowing me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. We'll see you next Wednesday. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under this section, consent agenda, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of a council member, and it will be considered separately. Council, this is item 4, A through L. Are there any items that you wish removed for individual voting or for presentation? If not, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda, item 4.
Motion to approve?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 4A through L. Further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Tyrell?
Aye.
Councilmember Lennon?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Next item on the agenda is ordinances. Under the regular agenda, item 5, first reading and a public hearing, consider adopting an ordinance reestablishing a curfew for minors. Chief Smith?
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Yes, sir.
Mayor and Council, the item before you today is a renewal of an ordinance that's been in effect for several years. But state law requires a sunset provision in that ordinance, so we have to talk about that every few years. And just going to give you a brief overview of what the ordinance contains, who it covers, and some of our activities over the last few years. The curfew actually covers every day of the week. Sunday through Thursday, the ordinance goes into effect at 11 p.m. and lasts until 6 a.m. the next morning. Then, if you were to look at the law, you might be a little confused. It looks like Friday's left out, but actually it's not. In lay terms, Friday night, Saturday night, but in legal terms, Saturday and Sunday from 12:01 a.m. until 6 a.m. That morning, the curfew is also in effect. The persons covered by the ordinance is any person under 17. The ordinance calls them minors. In state criminal law, we call them juveniles. Once you reach the age of 17, you're considered an adult under criminal law in Texas. It also covers parents and guardians of minors under the law, and specifically if they fail to control a minor and allow them to violate the curfew ordinance. It also covers business operators that knowingly allow minors to remain on premises during curfew hours. And again, that for both the parent guardian and the business operator, they have to know that they're allowing that to occur for them to be in violation of the ordinance. There are a variety of defenses to prosecution. Now, what that means technically is that the police officer who would engage a minor has to take the time to identify whether or not one of the defenses applies to the situation, and if so, they are not supposed to issue a citation and take this minor home. And briefly, those deal with if a minor is accompanied by their parent or guardian, then the defense applies and no action will be taken, or if they're specifically on an errand for that parent or guardian. Also, if they're traveling through town in a motor vehicle, the ordinance does not apply to them. If they're engaged in employment, and that would include to and from, without deviations though, but employment activities are accepted. Certainly emergencies are defenses to the ordinance. If the minor is on his or her own property or the property of a next door neighbor with that neighbor's knowledge and consent, that's acceptable under the ordinance. Minors who are engaged in school activities, religious activities, or civic activities, they are allowed to do that under the ordinance. Also, if they're in a supervised recreational activity, whether that's by the City of Temple or by another entity similar to a civic organization, then that's acceptable under the ordinance. And also, if they're exercising their First Amendment rights under the United States Constitution, then that's also an acceptable thing under the ordinance. What does this ordinance provide our community? And it really boils down to one thing, and that's crime prevention. The ordinance empowers our police officers to interact with minors after hours and helps prevent those minors from engaging in activities that are more serious crimes than a simple curfew violation. And it also allows our officers to intervene in situations where minors find themselves knowingly or unknowingly in harmful situations, and helps us prevent them from becoming victims of crime. And that's really very important to us. Over the last few years, our officers have engaged in citing curfew violations. In 2004, you can see 289 juveniles cited, with 5 adults rather cited. In 2005, 255 juveniles were cited. In 2006, 351 juvenile citations. Now, that's a jump of almost 100. That doesn't mean things were worse. That means, as a department, we identified that we weren't enforcing quite enough, and that we made that one of our focuses in the later part of 2006, and continue that this year. The next few slides are just some maps to show you the geographic impact of this ordinance, and you can see the first one's 2004. Seems to be a citywide situation. 2005, no difference really. You can also see the impact of corridors, how juveniles, like adults, tend to travel the main roadways. And in 2006, still indicating that juvenile ordinance, or curfew ordinance, is a citywide impact in our community. Be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments.
What's the fine for the violation of this?
I don't know the answer to that. And that's also, part of that's set by the state law, and then some of that's also set by the municipal court judge.
It's a maximum fine of $500. Now, whether the judge would levy a fine at the maximum, depending on the circumstances.
Is that fine the same for the offender, whether it's a juvenile or an adult, depending upon the
Yes,
situation?
that is correct. And we go through a series of letter writings to the parent and before they are charged, and it takes 3 violations of the minor before we charge the parent. The last letter is delivered in person, so we know they get it, to be certain that they're aware of what their responsibilities are under the ordinance.
Has this been an effective ordinance for us in the city, you think?
Yes, I do.
Any other questions, council? Chief, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. This item requires a public hearing, and if there are no other questions or comments from the council, I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item relating to the curfew ordinance for the City of Temple, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And council, this is an action item, and so for the first reading, do I hear a motion for approval of the first reading on that?
Motion to approve. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Cheater?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Tyler?
Aye.
Councilmember Lennon?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Next item is under the heading of ordinance. There is an A and B section. I'll read both of these items, and we can take them separately or together, council, your pleasure. The first item is 6A, second reading. Consider adopting an ordinance designating a tract of land consisting of approximately 2.061 acres located at 118 North 16th Street, owned by Celedonio and Adela Hernandez as City of Temple Tax Abatement Reinvestment Zone Number 12 for commercial industrial tax abatement. And item B is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing a tax abatement agreement with Celedonio and Adela Hernandez for real and personal property improvements for property consisting of approximately 2.061 acres of land at 118 North 16th Street, formerly the Safeway Grocery Building, for use as a grocery store. Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is a second reading of the ordinance and the first and only reading of a resolution that would authorize a tax payment agreement. We talked about it at your last meeting. This area, and it's shown on this overhead, is in a strategic investment zone. It's on East Adams between 14th and 16th Street and East Adams and Barton Avenue. It's about a little over two acres. We're asking that you designate it as a commercial industrial tax abatement district. It has to be within one to grant a tax abatement agreement. The ordinance in question makes findings under our ordinance that comply with state law that the property that you deem that including it in a tax abatement reinvestment zone would benefit the property, that the kind of improvements that are contemplated, in this case creating a grocery store in the site of the old Safeway store, are feasible, and that your action will lead to redevelopment of the area. So we ask that you make those findings in the ordinance. You conducted a public hearing last time, and we've given the required 7-day notice to all the other taxing entities as well. The second item on the agenda is for your consideration of a tax abatement agreement. Mr. Hernandez is asking for a 5-year tax abatement at 75%. He is proposing a creation of a grocery store. The building itself is about 14,000 square feet. He is working on that, and I think John Clary was telling me today he is actually up in the Metroplex right now trying to buy some equipment or, to outfit his store. And I just want to recognize Lee Peterson and John Clary from TDC who are here, and they worked very hard with Mr. Hernandez. And I had met with him, and John had met with him, and he needed some help with the application, and we really appreciate what they've done. It does meet your strategic goals for redevelopment of the east side. It is in the East Adams Strategic Investment Zone. We do recommend approval of a 5-year 75% tax abatement on the real property improvements and any personal property that has a useful life of at least 10 years. And it does meet the criteria. That is a higher percentage than we normally would do, but we're recommending approval because it is in one of our strategic investment zones, as well as just meeting a general need for a grocery store in East Temple. He is proposing initially to hire 8 full-time employees and an unknown number of part-time employees as well. His expenditure is about $250,000 to rehab that. And we've done a calculation based on current tax rates that our tax abatement would be worth about $5,000 to him over the life, the 5-year of the abatement at current tax rates. Glad to answer any questions you might have.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Graham. Council, questions? If there are no questions, is there any side council member that would like to make a motion for approval of one or both of these items?
Motion to approve items A and B of number 6.
Excellent. And is there a second to that motion?
Second.
I have a motion to second for approval of items 6A and 6B relating to the tax abatement for the property and owners described. If there are no further questions, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Tyrell?
Aye.
Councilmember Lennon?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Neighbor swear. Great. Thanks to Jonathan and Lee for John Clary and Lee Peterson for your help on this. It's much needed improvement to our east side, and that was great that we could identify them and help those people. Thanks for a great job.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to recognize the Temple Central Texas Workforce Board. Their executive director and the contractor are here. I think they're more than willing to assist in any employee matters.
Oh, it's good to have you guys with us. Thanks for being here. Item 7 is a first reading and a public hearing. Again, 2 parts, an A and a B, and both of these require a public hearing. If there's no objection, I'll read them together, and we can actually take the presentation together and do the public hearing simultaneously. Item 7A, first reading and public hearing, consider adopting an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the South Temple Comprehensive Plan to reflect regional commercial uses on a .56 acre and a .364 acre tract of land in Lot 1, Block 1, Green Acres, located at 22415 Southeast H.K. Dodge and Loop and 3305 Little River Road. Item 7B is the first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agriculture district to commercial district on a .56 acre and a .364 acre tract of land in Lot 1, Block 1, Green Acres, located at 22415 Southeast H.K. Dodge and Loop and 3305 Little River Road. Ms. Lyerly.
Okay, item A is amendment that is requested for the South Temple Comprehensive Plan from neighborhood and community retail uses to regional commercial uses. And some of the things that we need to do before we can recommend an amendment to comprehensive plan is to consider several issues. One would be looking at recent changes to warrant South Temple Comprehensive Plan amendment. The next thing that we'd want to look at is compatibility with surrounding land uses, and then, of course, the Thoroughfare plan, and then public facilities. And on the screen, I have a picture of the land use in that particular area. The subject property is this L-shaped hatching. It actually fronts the highway in this area, and then it also faces Little River Road over in this area. And if you look at the map, the red shaded areas are recommended for regional commercial uses, and the purple areas are recommended for neighborhood and community retail. And so you can see that the applicant's property is totally within the purple area, which is recommended for neighborhood and community retail. And so they're asking to have a change to the regional commercial uses, which they abut. You can see that they are surrounded by that particular land use recommendation. And then here's a map of the particular area showing the aerial. And the applicant's property is outlined in this yellow outline. And you can see that it is fronting the southeast H.K. Dodge and Loop. And then here's Little River Road over here to the west of the property. Across the street is the Action World Bowl Center, and then across the street we actually have the Shell Station, and then off to the east of the property is a Conoco Station. So what you can see is this particular area is basically in transition for regional commercial uses, and then of course it's recommended for neighborhood and community retail uses. And then the Thoroughfare in that particular area shows Little River Road and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. They are both recommended for minor arterials. And, of course, the loop is actually also State Highway 36 and US 190. So it is definitely in an area that is recommended for regional commercial uses. And then, of course, the utilities in the area, they do have access to water services, and then also this big green dot is a lift station. It's a sewer lift station that actually the sewer gets pumped over here up to the north along Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. So there are definitely facilities available for development for regional commercial uses in that area. Staff recommendation is to approve the amendment to the comprehensive plan to reflect regional commercial uses, and that is based on that the facts that the proposed amendment for regional commercial uses conforms to the future trends of the future land use plan, since the area is located near a designated intersection and contains adequate size for development. The amendment conforms to the Thoroughfare plan, since it is located near minor arterials and along a state highway, and the amendment conforms to the adequacy of public facilities. And on March the 5th of 2007, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended 7-0 for approval of amending the South Temple Comprehensive Plan to reflect regional commercial uses for the subject property. And would you like me to go on to Part B?
Yes, ma'am. That'd be just fine.
Okay, and that particular request is the zone change request that goes along with this land use recommendation. And this particular zoning request is a zone change from agricultural district to commercial district.
Now, can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Go ahead to the next picture. Maybe that'll answer the question. I thought you showed everything in purple was general retail. So this particular area is zoned agriculture. It is not zoned general retail already.
Yes, let me explain that. The land
Okay.
use, we're looking at two different things.
Yeah.
We're looking at land use recommendations versus existing zoning districts.
Okay, just,
Yes.
okay,
And
very good.
so,
Okay.
even though the applicant's property is recommended for neighborhood and community retail uses, it is a zoned agricultural district.
Very good.
And it is next to a zoning district that is already existing as a commercial district. And those were the areas on the land use map that were shown as red. If you look at the adjacent property, which belongs to the Action World Center, the Bowl Center, it is recommended for commercial uses, but it actually is zoned light industrial district. So a lot of times our zoning districts do not agree, or they do not match the recommendations in the comprehensive plan.
Good, thank you for that explanation.
And then this is another picture of the land use map, which you can see the different zoning districts overlaid on top of the recommendations for the comprehensive plan. And then this is an aerial without all the shading so that you can see a little bit better what is actually on the ground. And I don't think I explained it, but the loop actually separates Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, which goes to the north, from Little River Road, which actually goes to the south. And as you can see, the east side of the property actually shows some residential uses. And then this is a picture from the subject property looking towards the intersection of Little River Road and the loop. And you can see the Shell station across the street. And then this is a picture of a fruit stand that is actually on a portion of the applicant's property. It was closed down, and they would like to reopen it pending the decision of this zone change request. Fruit stands are not allowed in the agricultural district, but they are allowed in the commercial district. And you can also see in the background to the east the Conoco station across the street. And then some of the residential uses on the other side of the fruit stand. And then this is a picture of those residential uses. This particular structure is a two-story structure. It looks residential in nature, but the side of it has been burned or damaged, and I was told that it was actually used for storage. And then this is a picture of the portion of the applicant's property that fronts Little River Road, and basically this is all you see is just brush. And this is a picture taken from the Action World Bowl Center parking lot. And then that is the bowling center, and then there is a church on the other side of the bowling center. And so in order to recommend approval of a zone change to commercial district, the property needs to meet the purpose statement of the commercial district, which states that the property needs to be located along major thoroughfares at intersections, and that the commercial district is intended to serve citywide and regional service areas. And then some examples of businesses allowed in the commercial district is most retail uses, major and minor vehicle service or repair, indoor, outdoor entertainment, office uses, and also some residential uses. And then examples of uses not allowed in the commercial district would be most industrial uses, manufactured home sales, and wrecking yards. And then, of course, the commercial district has setback requirements. Okay. The front yard setback, there really is not a front yard setback. It basically is a zero setback line, except that no structure may be nearer than 30 feet from the center line of the street. And then the side yard setbacks for non-residential uses are zero, but if they are adjacent to residential uses or residential zoning districts, they have to observe a 10-foot separation. And then for a rear yard setback, it's the same thing. It's a 0-foot setback, but if they are adjacent to residential uses, they also would have the 10-foot separation from the property line. And then I have zoning ordinance section 13 on the screen. This is basically just explaining that non-residential developments near residential districts or uses require screening. So in this case, if the zoning was changed to a commercial district, any development going into the property would be required to add screening with fencing adjacent to those residential uses that I showed you in the earlier picture. And we mailed out 5 notices to surrounding property owners within 200 feet of the site, and we received 2 notices back in favor of the request, and those are shown with the red A's, and we did not receive any notices in opposition. And so staff is recommending approval of the zone change to commercial district since the subject property borders a commercial district and land recommended for regional commercial district. The subject property is located near the intersection of minor arterials and state highway as stated in the commercial district purpose statement. The subject property is in the vicinity of other retail, office, and institutional properties, and adequate public facilities exist in the area for water and the use of on-site sewage facilities until sewer is extended to the area. And on March the 5th of 2007, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of a zone change to commercial district for the subject property by 7-0. And I believe that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
What use are they going to make of this property? What type of business?
The property owner would like to market the property for commercial, just future commercial uses, but they would like to reopen that fruit stand on the portion fronting Highway 36.
In that same form?
I believe so.
So are portable buildings allowed to conduct business out of?
Mr. Snyder, that's not a portable building, it's got cloth on each side.
It's a tent.
It's a tent.
Yes.
That's pretty portable.
I mean, I say that metal side.
Is that allowed?
I would have to check on that. I'm not sure if it would be allowed. They would actually have to upgrade. During the planning and zoning meeting, they had asked about the screening, and since it would, if the zoning change would be allowed, then they would be required to screen adjacent to those residential structures. Right now, there is no screening. So they would have to definitely be upgraded.
So would they come back with a plan with the screen on it and show what kind of building and all that type of stuff?
Yes, we would definitely look into that to make sure they were brought up to code.
If they weren't going to put a business on that property, would we ordinarily make a zoning change for the purpose of the sale of a property for a particular use?
Well, right now, the property, they're wanting, they have the fruit stand, but normally what happens is, as far as screening, that would happen whenever they did start developing permanent structures on the property. Then we would look at those requirements through the building permit process.
No, I understand.
Oh, but you're just wanting to know.
If they just had a piece of land and they were wanting to change it to commercial because they'd like to sell it to someone and they think it would have a better sale price for use as a commercial, would we proceed with a zoning change under those conditions, or?
We could. We usually like to have some, a tenant that's acquired the property, or that we know definitely what's going to that property, but in this case, we only have that one use.
Okay, so there's no requirement for them to put the fruit stand
Right.
on there again for us to make this zoning change to commercial?
Yes.
Okay.
The property that's adjacent to that on that corner, we changed that to commercial so they could sell portable buildings.
That's correct, and those buildings are not there anymore. So it's just vacant property right now.
And that was a specific use, because they were
Yes.
doing it, and we needed to change
Yes.
it, and what they were doing and wanting to do was within the use of that property.
That's one thing about a zone change is you can rezone property for a particular business, but a lot of times those uses cease and then other uses come in.
Yeah. And once it's changed, it's changed.
Yes.
If they ask for a higher use.
Didn't you say that you were changing this zone for the use of a fruit stand because they were in violation currently?
Yes. Yes.
So they are changing it so they'll be in compliance
That's
to
correct.
continue a fruit stand?
No, I understand, but then your question
Yeah,
it
then do we
was,
allow?
and now do they have to upgrade that fruit stand? Is the fruit stand as they were using it in compliance with commercial zoning as we have in the city, or do they have to do screening? Do they have to upgrade that building? And so that just led my
Yes.
thought process to be, well, if they then don't do it because they don't want to upgrade or put those kind of costs in, or put that money into to that facility, can they just leave it commercial? And the answer was yes.
Yes.
So, and otherwise, you'll make sure they're in compliance with that zoning, with whatever it is that they put on there.
That's correct.
So, any other questions before we go to the public hearing? Again, this is two-part. The change to the South Temple Comprehensive Plan is Part A, and Part B is the zoning change from agriculture to commercial district. And if there's no objection, council, I'll go ahead and take the public hearing for both these items simultaneously. If there's no objections, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Those wishing to speak before the council on either of these items, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on items A and B if you wish to take them together.
Motion to approve A and B, please.
Second?
You have a motion and a second for items 7A and 7B. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Mayor, before we vote,
Yeah,
make sure that I'm clear on that. If we vote for this and they want to continue a fruit stand, it's going to have, the facility will have to be upgraded to meet all the requirements from commercial usage, correct?
Yes, we would definitely check into that and make sure they comply with regulations.
So if they put the tent back up, you'd shut them down just as...
We
don't
would
know if
make
that's
sure.
If a tent is not allowed
Yes.
in a
Yeah,
commercial
correct,
district.
right.
Yes.
Right. It's not like, I don't think we're saying it's going to come back to you with a site plan or anything else, but she's saying they'll review that use and make sure they're in compliance with laws.
Okay. Yeah, no, not at all. It's appropriate comments. Okay, any other questions? If there are none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Linder?
No.
Councilmember Schneider?
No.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 8A is again a first reading and a public hearing, along with a corresponding item B of a first reading and a public hearing. Again, if there's no objection, I'll take both of these together. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the West Temple Comprehensive Plan, future land use map from agriculture to neighborhood and community retail on 10.349 or so acres. Tract of land in Outblock 1102D, City Edition, located on the north side of FM 2305, West Adams Avenue, and west of the planned outer loop, which is now Hilliard Road, and north of Meadowbrook Drive. 8B is the first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agriculture district to general retail district on that same piece of property on 10.349 plus or minus acre tract of land in Outblock 1102D, City Edition, located on the north side of FM 2305 West Adams Avenue, west of the planned outer loop, Hilliard Road, and north of Meadowbrook Drive. Mr. Mabry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the third of 3 properties to go in this area to go through the future land use map and zone change review process. The aerial and everything should look familiar to you when I get to them. As to echo Tammy's presentation earlier, when we are looking at amending the future land use map, three things to think about are, has things changed in the area enough to warrant the future land use map amendment? And one way to think of these potential changes that have happened is the proposal and agreement with the future land use map and plan, with the Thoroughfare plan, and with the public facilities map of water and sewer services that are in the area. The West Temple plan was adopted in 1999. This property, the subject property, was annexed in 1997. For the neighborhood and community retail future land use category, the plan recommends that to be located at the intersection of arterials, that it be used for non-strip development with room for pad sites, parking, landscaping, and circulation. There are two other parcels near the subject property that abut it or nearly abut it, one being 28 acres and one being 4 acres. And then this property are all proposed to be part of a shopping center on 2305 at the intersection of Hilliard Road. There are several uses in the area, among them retail, offices, churches, and residential. And this is an aerial view of what I just described. The subject property is in red dotted lines, and the remainder portion of a proposed future retail center is in dark dotted lines on the aerial. Some of the features on the aerial are some large lot residential properties to the north. The Pecan Point Apartments are here in this area in the northwest. They were not built at the time of the aerial photo being taken. The Westfield subdivision is here on the west. 2305, where Adams Avenue goes, borders the subject property. There are two churches across 2305 from the property, and there's a home builder's office here at this corner that wasn't built at the time of the photo, and a neighborhood retail establishment with a donut shop and a few other small businesses in it. And then the Meadows subdivision is here farther south. And this is Hilliard Road, by the way, going north and south from 2305. This is a look at the future land use map for the area. There was I think some sort of error with the field notes that were submitted, so that it shows it overlapping onto the other property, and normally this would be a concern, but it'll all be under the same ownership and the same part of the same complex, so and the same zoning even, so it's not an issue for us at the moment. The applicant is requesting future land use map amendment from agricultural to neighborhood and community retail. Some of the other future land use categories in the area of the subject property are agricultural here in green to the north, high density residential in red where the Pecan Point Apartments are, low density residential to the west, moderate density residential to the southwest and south, and then some more low-density residential to the south on either side of this pink neighborhood and community retail designation, where that small shopping center was that I pointed out earlier. And then, of course, you just approved this lightning bolt-shaped tract on your consent agenda to be changed to neighborhood and community retail, and then this area was changed to neighborhood and community retail, I believe, at the end of last year.
Now, before you switch off that, Mr. Ray, where the word agricultural is, center top, is that where we just recently talked about the multi-site detention area?
Yes, that is this kind of gives you a general outline of the detention area, where along this border and then the border of the subject property.
Okay, great.
We actually required that.
Oh, okay, the city required that, okay, for that purpose. Okay, thank you.
So there are several neighborhood and community retail designations in the area of the subject property. The Thoroughfare plan 2305 is a major arterial on the Thoroughfare plan, and the outer loop that is being proposed will also be a major arterial. This map shows the route of the outer loop, and you can see that it does intersect with 2305 near the subject property and almost right at the subject property. This is Hilliard, and then Hilliard becomes Old Waco Road south of 2305. The public facilities map is next. Water lines are along 2305 and along Hilliard Road, and so are sewer lines. They are a sewer line is along FM 2305. The in blue here, this line along Hilliard on the other side of Hilliard is an 8-inch water line, and then there's a 14-inch water line on the north side of 2305 that runs along the entire stretch of the subject property and the other properties that have been zoned for, or that have gone through the future land use map amendment. There's also a new sewer line that doesn't show up on the map, that a 10-inch sewer line that goes from here in the Westfield area down to 2305 and across Hilliard Road and then across 2305 again. It is 10 inches, and as I said, was newer than the map that I had available to make this presentation.
Okay, and that's the sewer line you're pointing out there?
Yes, sir, the blinking green dashed line. On March 5th, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 in favor of approval of this future land use map amendment, because the proposed plan amendment conforms to the future land use plan, since the area is in the vicinity of other non-residential uses and contains adequate size for a shopping center development. The plan amendment conforms to the Thoroughfare plan, since it is located near 2 major arterial roadways, and adequate public facilities serve the area of the proposed plan amendment. And I can move on to the next presentation if that's all right. This is the zoning component of this property. It is 10.349 acres, and there were those 2 subject properties, or 2 other properties, being around 28 acres and around 4 acres that were approved from agricultural to GR late last year, and just on your consent agenda for the 4-acre property. The purpose of the GR, General Retail District, is to allow retail sales, restaurants, grocery stores, department stores, fuel sales, and offices. There's a maximum building height of 3 feet, or 3 stories, and it should be located at the intersection of major arterials. Uses that are not permitted in GR are pawn shops, car dealership, sales areas, major vehicle repair, and industrial uses. This graphic shows a graphical version of the area regulations, area requirements for the GR. The main one is the 100-foot lot depth, which the lot meets, and then there are 15 and 10-foot front and side yard requirements for once a building is on the property. This shows as the future land use map, and this dashed-in area, provided that it is approved, would become pink, just like you see on the map. Right now it is still agricultural until you vote on it, or until the second reading, I guess. But the request would make it pink as it shows now. Mainly the main point of this aerial is just to, again, emphasize the recent zone changes for the 2 nearby properties, and they're shown right now on the aerial. The zoning for the surrounding areas is fairly mixed. There's general retail to the west, multifamily 2 where the Pecan Point apartments are. The area to the north is agricultural, the GR for the larger 28-acre piece. Neighborhood service is across 2305, and then there's agricultural on either side of the neighborhood service. And there's a piece of GR here as well. For the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, 8 notices were mailed out to surrounding property owners within 200 feet of the subject property. 4 4 property owners returned notices in favor of the zone change, and those are shown in A's on the map, in green A's. At the March 5th hearing, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 in favor of approval of the zone change because the GR district is in accordance with the requested future land use designation for the subject property. The property is located near the intersection of major arterials and of a major arterial and a future major arterial as required in the purpose statement for the general retail district. The property is in the vicinity of other retail, office, and institutional uses, and there are adequate public facilities in the area of the property. And at this point, I can answer any questions you might have on this case.
Thank you, Mr. Mabry. Council, questions regarding this presentation and this property request? If there are no questions for Mr. Mabry, then we'll move to the public hearing. If there are no objections, we'll take both A and B together in the public hearing. And anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. I'll declare the public hearing open. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, item 8A and B, comprehensive plan change for the West Temple Comprehensive Plan, and A, and a zoning change request from agriculture to general retail district on B.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion is second to approve item 8A and B. If there's no further discussion or questions, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Tyrell?
Aye.
Councilmember Lena?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings?
Aye. Item 9A and B, same thing again. You guys will switch places. Go to Ms. Lowry again. Item 9A is a first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the South Temple Comprehensive Plan to reflect regional commercial uses on a 3.08 acre tract of land in outblocks 1058A and 1060A, City Addition, located on the west side of State Highway 95, north of Barnhart Road, and across from the John Deere Tractor and Equipment Store on State Highway 95. And 9B is a first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agriculture district to commercial district on a 3.08 acre tract of land in outblocks 1058A, 1060A, City Addition, located on the west side of State Highway 95, north of Barnhart Road, and across from the John Deere Tractor and Equipment Store on State Highway 95. Ms. Lyon.
Okay, Part A of this request is to change the South Temple Comprehensive Plan. Right now, the applicant's property has 2 recommendations from that particular comprehensive plan. They want to change the recommendation from low-density residential uses and neighborhood and community retail uses to regional commercial uses. And as I stated in the prior presentation, in order to do that, we would need to consider recent changes that may warrant a South Temple Comprehensive Plan amendment. Also, we need to look at compatibility with the surrounding land uses, and we need to look at the Thoroughfare plan, and then, of course, the public facilities in the area. And I have, to clarify the 2 different recommendations for that particular property, I have a portion of the land use map on the screen. The applicant's property is outlined in this black line, and actually, the line is moved a little off from where it needs to be, but it actually has the corner of the property is in purple, which is shown as the neighborhood community retail uses. And then we have the yellow area, which is recommended for low-density residential uses. It is adjacent to property that is recommended for regional commercial uses, and that is shown in red. And that was actually a zone change and a South Temple Comprehensive Plan amendment that happened recently. And I'll talk more about that in the next slide. But so basically what this is showing is at one time, this particular intersection, which happens to be State Highway 95, which is what the property is fronting, and then we have the intersection of State Highway 36. At one time, that particular intersection in this area was recommended for neighborhood and community retail uses, but the property has been changed, or that particular area has been changing towards a regional commercial trend. Across the street, along State Highway 95, we have regional commercial uses that are recommended, and that is actually the site of a wrecking yard. And then this, if you look to the south portion of that red area, is the actual site of the John Deere store that is on State Highway 95. And so that is recommended for neighborhood and community retail uses. Okay, and then this is a shaded area. This particular red area is the property that is adjacent to the applicant's property, which is shown in this black dashed line. And that was actually changed in October of 2006, and it went from a zone change from ag district to commercial district, and it also involved changing the comprehensive plan from neighborhood and community retail uses to regional commercial uses. So that is a recent change that has effects on this particular property. This particular property has a house on it, but the house has extensive damage to it, and the applicants are no longer living on the property. So this is basically just vacant residential property, or agricultural residential property. And the area to the south of the applicant's property actually is the only remaining residential use on State Highway 95 in this area. And it actually has a manufactured home and a single-family house, and in the back there are some chicken coops. And then we have across the street, we have the wrecking yard, which is shown shaded in red for regional commercial uses, and then we have the John Deere store. And then you can see off to the corner of the aerial is State Highway 36, and then of course you can see that the property fronts State Highway 95. And then this is another picture of the recommended land uses for that particular area. And you can see a little bit better on this particular map that there is a little portion of the neighborhood and community retail uses right in this area, and then the rest of the property is low-density residential. And then you can see that there are some the state highway in this area, State Highway 36, and it intersects with the State Highway 95. So this particular property is within two intersecting state highways. And then we have utilities in the area. There is a water availability fronting SH 95, and then there are sewer. Actually, this is just around the corner from my other case where you have that green dot that you saw in the other presentation. Well, that's where it is, right over here where the Action Bowling Center is. So they do not have sewer on the property or available on the property, but they would have to be able to, they could have septic system until they could extend sewer services to the property. And there are some sewer services across the intersection to the northeast. Staff is recommending approval of this amendment to the South Temple Comprehensive Plan to reflect regional commercial uses. The proposed amendment for regional commercial uses conforms to the future trends of the future land use plan, and since the area is located near designated intersections of intersecting highways and contains adequate size for commercial development, and as stated earlier, this is in the vicinity of state highways, and it conforms to the adequacy of public facilities. On March the 5th of 2007, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend the amendment to reflect regional commercial uses for the property. And then, if you'd like, I'll go on to the zoning portion.
Please do.
Okay. The property is currently zoned agricultural district, and the applicants are requesting a zone change to commercial district. And this is the property in yellow hatching, and then, of course, this is Highway 95 in this area, and then this is State Highway 36. The property to the north, as stated earlier, is already zoned commercial district. The property is across the street from property which is used as a wrecking yard, and it is zoned a light industrial district with the conditional use permit for operation of the wrecking yard. And then we have the agricultural district. The property on the other side of the adjacent residential uses is already zoned commercial district. And then this is the land use map that you saw earlier. And then this is an aerial of the property without all the shading, so you can see a little bit more of what is around the particular property, which just shows the wrecking yard across the street, the John Deere store. This is the property that I pointed out a little while ago that is already commercial district. So this particular residential use is in between commercial in this area and then commercial in this area and then across the street from the light industrial and retail uses. And this is a picture of the applicant's property from Highway 95. This is a picture of the house, which is right in this area. And as you can see, there's a lot of vegetation in front of the property. I had a hard time even seeing the house when I was out there taking pictures. It's hidden, but it has a lot of brush, and these trees, which you can see, are right in this area here. And then these are the residential uses on the south end of that property, where you can see all those trees that are right there along the property line. And then these are views of the driveway from the applicant's property. And when you look across the street, you see the fencing for the wrecking yard, and then off in this area, you see the intersecting highways. And then if you look to the southeast, you can see the John Deere store across the street. And then this is the residential area just next door to the applicant's property. And this is the purpose statement of the commercial district. In order to recommend the approval of a commercial district, the property would need to meet the purpose statement of that particular district, which states that the property should be located along major thoroughfares at intersections, and that the commercial district is intended to serve citywide or regional service areas. Examples of businesses allowed in the commercial district are most retail uses, major and minor vehicle service repair, indoor and outdoor entertainment, office uses, and some residential uses. And then industrial uses, most industrial uses are not allowed in the commercial district, and manufactured home sales and wrecking yards are also not allowed. Even though this particular property has a wrecking yard across the street, they're not allowed in the commercial district. And then, of course, front yard setbacks are for non-residential properties or developments. It would be a 0 front yard setback, but it would have to be at least 30 feet from the center line of the street. And then in this particular instance, since the residential use, with the residential use next door, the development would have to observe a 10-foot side yard setback. And the rear yard setback is 0 feet for non-residential uses and 10 feet abutting non-residential uses. And then this is just this ordinance section stating the screening requirements for non-residential districts adjacent to residential districts. We mailed out 5 notices, and we did not receive any notices in favor of or in opposition to the request. And staff recommends approval of the requested commercial district, and that is based on the property's location in close proximity to the intersecting highways. And the subject property is across the street from a light industrial district, and the wrecking yard, it is across the street from a John Deere store, and it abuts the commercial district. And although residential uses are adjacent to the property to the south, that particular property is already surrounded by commercial district to the south of that property, and it is in close proximity to the industrial uses across the street in the John Deere store. On March the 5th, the Planning and Zoning Board recommended approval 7-0 for amending the South Temple Comprehensive Plan to reflect regional commercial uses, and also for the requested zone change to commercial district. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
You showed the photograph of the manufactured home, the mobile home. It was on that property, and along the right side of that, in that particular picture, you showed that tree line.
Yes.
Is that an adequate screen, depending upon the use, or when that property owner constructs on the commercial property, to be the screening between residential and commercial?
I believe it is. When you stand over here, you really can't see anything on the other side of the property. I had to walk around to see what was next door. But that would be...
Screening can be vegetation.
Yes, that's correct. Our screening ordinance says that it needs to be fencing, or you can use a combination of vegetation, or if the vegetation suffices, then it could be just solely vegetation. It would depend on if the property is sold, and depending on if they took the trees down, we would look at that. Anything going in to the property, we would look at that during the building permit process and make sure if the trees are still there, that kind of thing. So we would look at that.
Whose property are the trees on, if you know? And I know you didn't do surveying or anything, but do they appear to be on the mobile homes property or on the commercial the property under consideration?
It appears to be on the applicant's property. The applicant's property.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's okay.
Does the owner intend to develop this commercial property himself?
They would like to market the property to sell as commercial development.
I'm a little bit confused. We're bringing cases that are rezoning, not knowing what's going to be there. So basically, we have no control whatsoever what type of materials are built or anything there.
That's not the purpose of zoning.
I understand. But previously, when they come to council, they have the building, the layout, and the type of screening, and what fits to their neighbors and that type of deal. Here we won't. Once it's zoned, you can just basically go get a permit and whatever materials or whatever, as long as they're in code, you're going to build.
Yes, that's correct. That's the difference between a planned development district and just a straight zoning district where we don't have that.
Saying, Tony, we won't. I mean, we won't have any in those thoroughfares, in those entryways. We won't have no.
And I don't. Well, unless we get our act together and we solve this with our corridor
currently
planning
we don't.
Yes, and
I mean, even for instance, the property that is next door, that was for a business. If I remember, as a shop or something like shop business that wanted to put a shop in. Is that fenced? Currently, I don't believe it is. But didn't they zone that to put a shop,
Yes.
auto
Yes.
shop there? Best I remember. And if that's built there, is it? And that was currently, now the property that we're talking about now is residential. Is there fencing up there?
I know they have a lot of vegetation separating that particular property from the residential properties that are on the east side. No, I'm sorry, the west side.
I don't believe there is. I don't believe there's the same screening as you talked about as far as trees adjacent to there.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that we're not having any control over the screening or any of that kind of stuff in these quarters that we're concerned with.
And that's because we haven't taken care of business for protecting the property value in terms of, I guess what concerns me is we almost voted down a zoning change a few votes ago just because we didn't want a fruit stand there, when that's not right. I mean, the two are entirely different. Zoning is not about what somebody is going to put there. It's about, and we're not supposed to consider that. They're applying for a zoning change. They want to market the property, and we approve the zoning based on that. What goes there is a whole different issue of us enforcing our ordinances, putting corridor plans into place. If we don't want metal buildings in certain areas and things like that, then we have to take care of that. I don't disagree. It concerns me what will show up there, but we can't not approve a zoning because what we hope won't show up there. That's two distinctly different things, and we have to get together and decide what we want this community to look like, what the main thoroughfares we want to look like, and then we have to get staff to work with us and solve that.
I'm a little bit in disagreement with you, Tony, because, I mean, in protecting the neighbors or anyone to either side of that, I mean, we would kind of want to know what's there and what it's going to look like, and if it's a residential area, which in this case it is, what's going to be there. We take that in consideration in every case, whether it's, if it's commercial by residential, or what it looks like, or the front of a new subdivision, what's going in there. I mean,
see, that's a platting process. That's a different thing than somebody saying, we want to change this to commercial to be able to market this property and have it available. I mean, who would want to buy a piece of property speculatively if they couldn't get the property?
They do it all the time. They put a contingency, if I'll buy this property and we're going to build this, contingent upon it changing zoning.
Well, but it may be a speculative investment based on what it is. I guess it's a slippery slope to start trying. I mean, I think what we need to still step back and figure out what we want to do in the areas and what we want things to look like. I guess she's going to tell us they sent out notices, and the notices came back what?
We did not receive any in favor of or in opposition to.
So the people next door, the residential people next door, received a notice and
Yes.
did not respond with either notice. So,
Yes.
I mean, that's the option. The system works. The property owners adjacent and within a certain amount of distance are supposed to get it. They come in, they come to public hearing, they say, no, it's going to ruin our property value, ruin our life, do whatever. And then, but, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think that I don't even think we're legally supposed to do that per se in terms of how we end up. I mean, that's
Well, I think we've gotten used to, if I can just respond, and then you can respond legally, but I think we've gotten used to controlling appearance by zoning, and either, maybe not overtly, but we've done it by basically allowing or denying a zoning change because we didn't like what was presented there. And your statement is exactly correct. Are we supposed to or not? Whether we have or not, I think we have. And that's why, I asked the question a little bit ago, is this ordinary for us to approve a zoning change without really knowing what's going there or how they're going to construct it or anything? And I guess it's okay to do that. And they can do that. But it leaves us open. And so we need to do exactly what you've stated and we've talked about and discussed is we need to get our development standards tightened down, do our, I'm not going to use the M word, just stop, allowing metal buildings until we get something else in place.
I just think that if it, and I don't know, Jonathan may say differently, but it's hard to approve a different zoning when you don't know it's going to be there. I mean, and I can't say that we've done a lot of that at all until just like recently. I mean, I guess we've been used to, and maybe that's just because we've been used to it, and they'll come forward with a plan, and does it fit, and that type of deal, and we vote on it. And a lot of those, I might add, that I remember has been contingent upon the zoning changing, whether it's a subdivision or it's a commercial or retail facility.
Well, we've seen a lot more planned developments as well that we have a tremendous amount of control over.
And I mean, and my point is it, and maybe it's just the code issues. I mean, we approved that other plan. He said he's going to put a shop on it and clean up it, clean the front up, build a new shop, and do all the repairs, indoors and all that type of stuff. That was a use, and it's going to clean up the area and that type of deal. And that was the presentation. And whether we haven't followed through, if they have a fence there or not, or I'm not sure.
Let me offer just a little legal perspective, and we have a new planning director back there who may have a different perspective as well. But I mean, from my experience, and some of this is just observation and some just legal requirements, it is quite common to rezone property without knowing the particular use. If you look at all the cases we've had today, including the one, I guess the pair between those two items you're talking about, the items on Hilliard Road and West Adams, we don't know exactly what's going to go in there because they're still planning it. We have an idea of it, but it's quite common to not know exactly what's going to go in there. So when you really are looking at a zoning case, you're being asked the question, is this an appropriate location for whatever the category is, commercial, and all of the potential uses that go in there? And you have to be thinking about all of those. And it's true that in many cases we've got somebody with a particular project in mind, and they're coming in with that, and they're saying, out of their, in their interest, they're saying, I plan to put a pet store in there, and I'm asking for GR or whatever is required, but we don't know that's going to happen, and it can create a false sense of security. They will show you a nice drawing and a photograph and say, well, I'm going to put a pet store there, but we know that may not happen, and when you change that to GR or commercial, whatever it is, you have to understand that every one of those uses could go in there. And so we have screening requirements, we have landscaping requirements, we have building material requirements to some extent that apply to all those zoning classifications, and that is your basic line of defense as you're looking to this and saying, is this an appropriate location for commercial? You have a certain body of rules that apply to any commercial development in terms of screening and landscaping and all that, and from time to time we need to look at those and see if they're still adequate to protect us. And we also have the option of doing a planned development in some cases, which gives us even more controls. We can add controls, we can restrict and add uses. So I think that the answer is you're both right in the sense that we typically have an idea of what use somebody is thinking about, but we have no guarantees that that's going to happen. And in fact, even when we do a planned development, we've seen some come back recently that have come through planned development. Somebody had a very specific idea, and they agreed to certain materials, a certain look and feel and all that, and it didn't happen, and they're coming back either for straight zoning or a change of the planned development. So I just come back to, you have to ask yourself, is this an appropriate location for that use and everything? And that's why it's so important, I think, the way they're doing it now and showing you all the uses that are allowed in commercial or GR or whatever it is, because you could see any of those.
And you flip the property, and all bets are off.
And I think property owners have the right to come to you and ask you, is this an appropriate location for whatever they want to change it to, and ask you to change it, and you have to decide, is that an appropriate location, whether they're ready to do something or they want to sell the property to somebody who is ready to do it. The question is there, and they have the right to ask that question.
That's why I'm confused, like on the 2305 project, it's for a extension of the shopping center that even previous to that, it's a shopping center. I mean, they even said it in the presentation, the extension for it, they said it for a shopping center. And that's where I guess I'm confused. And, the one previous that you spoke of is the fruit stand. I think that the applicant thinks that a fruit stand's okay there in commercial dealing and will continue to operate out of a portable building, a tent.
If it's within ordinances, why can't they? I mean, I think that's the thing, is we've been very fortunate in that for the 5 years, people have come, they bring their stuff, a lot of people come and show us real nice, and they follow through. But, I mean, if the ordinances allow it, why can't the individual do that? I mean, I think ultimately, if we start trying, we want to tighten it up on them when it's actually what they're wanting to do is actually within ordinance. And we have to deal with it on the ordinance level if we don't want a fruit stand in a tent there. I mean, we don't even know if it'll allow it or not. But I think that's the thing that is, most of the time people do. They come and show us nice drawings. But if I'm not, like on that corner on 2305 and Hilliard, we could see a mini storage there as well. I mean, we could all of a sudden, that property could flip and we could have a mini storage thing there. And there's nothing we can do to stop that because it's within the zoning unless we say we don't, we put...
That's my point.
Well, but we have to do it ordinance-wise unless we come up with articulation standards and material standards and all these things to make those things look a certain way that'll be fine, or to make them where it doesn't work ordinance-wise. But there's no, I mean, that property could sell tomorrow, and all projects could be off.
One of the things I want to say about this development, it's my understanding that the owner of this property, want to market this for sale on the commercial level versus the residential level. She wants to sell the property, commercial. When you have a wrecking yard across the street and basically catty corner John Deere,
On a highway.
on a highway, on a 4-lane highway, you know, she's looking at marketing her property, and what she's asking is if we would consider making it, she's requesting to make it commercial. Not, I'm gonna plan to build this here, what do y'all think?
Yeah, I understand. I was under the impression that we needed to know, I guess is what I was asking Jonathan, and I think the mayor probably had the same question when he asked it on the first case, is that, I mean, it can still be marketed as commercial property, even if it's still existing residential. But, you know.
Your concern, I share the exact same
That's just,
concern.
you know,
I mean,
I
I
don't want to go back on what we've been trying to do with the SIS and all that kind of stuff, and so that's why I asked the question. And if it's nothing wrong with changing the property and doing that, we'll change it.
Well, but you and I
Not a
both
problem.
we all want to see the same thing. I mean, that's why we have to deal with it on ordinance level to protect all the property owners that come in and invest in what we want it to look like.
And I think that, I mean, and I'm doing it to even for this particular property owner, you know, and the next property. It's not just picking on this one; it's protecting that property owner that even wants to sell this property.
So that we got to tighten the ordinance.
You know, and in the attempt to do that, I mean, still market it on a commercial or basis, but how do you protect that? I mean, you will allow something next door, and you have a whatever that doesn't match. Well, they've just lost. Probably their property value could very well go down.
But we could also wipe out their property value by not granting a zoning until we know, for an opportunity to speculatively sell it. I guess, hopefully I hear that these things are being worked on. We've got these ordinances being worked on. We've got the SIS and other things. I mean, that's the way.
Comprehensive plan.
We got a comprehensive plan. That's the way we can solve this to ultimately protect this community and property owners, is tightening it down instead of allowing pretty much anything.
Like I said, I'm not trying to disallow them to change their property from agriculture and residential to commercial just for that purpose. It's just for protecting the property values on both sides, including the subject property. So,
Mr. Dolan, any comment you would care to lend to this discussion at this point?
Actually, on your next agenda item, I was going to speak to some of these things regarding the land use plan. I think with the 3 cases that you considered this evening, none of those were part of a plan development request. When you looked at the previous zoning case for what is known as a planned outer loop or Hilliard in 2305, the statement is true. It is shown or thought to be a shopping center, but the zoning allows any use allowed under that district. I think what you're starting to see is some of the improvements made to the highways with improvements made to the water and sewer for the public utilities. You're starting to see what is a request for a higher and better use for the land. The other thing to take into consideration that I'll discuss in the next agenda item is the corridor plans or the sector plans that were done in the late 80s, early 90s, middle 90s, discuss some things for future trends and for things for you to consider. What the land use plans don't show is that when those roads and water and sewer improvements get made, they should be updated accordingly. And that's what we hope to do when I talk about the next agenda item. And so I think you are correct to take a look at the idea of, is the area large enough to allow for the requested use? And I think in all 3 of these tonight that you see it is. They vary in size from anywhere from the 10 to the 3 to the almost 1 acre parcel. But they're all part of adjacent areas that are already designated for commercial uses or general retail uses in previous zoning cases. So it's a continuation.
Are we saying that by not allowing a zone change that we are not allowing this particular owner to sell the property at commercial use versus residential use?
Well, the highest and best use, I guess.
But still, it could be the same use, is what I'm saying.
Well, it's not answering the question that he is asking the Planning and Zoning Commission and Council, which is this an appropriate location for commercial? That's a fair question. Is it an appropriate location, given the intersection of these two highways, for commercial property?
And that is the determination of the.
Sure.
Your question
Yes. I mean, that's a
really
definite yes
relates.
based off the presentation and where it sits. That's, I understand, yeah. If that's the question, it's a no-brainer.
The question you're really asking, or that we're all concerned about, is, are the controls that we have in place for commercial property adequate to protect our vision of the community and adjacent property? And that is part of what the plan is going to study, some of what the staff is looking at in terms of metal buildings and other things. But it's an entirely different question than, is this an appropriate location for commercial use?
And from a planning perspective, would I be wrong in saying that the highest and best use of this property is probably commercial?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I would be correct?
Yes, you are correct.
But can we use that disallowing to be changed from one to the other in order to protect the property owners on either side? I mean, is that a?
That's our call.
Is that a reason to disallow?
Well,
is that not a question we should be asking ourselves?
No, it's exactly. I mean, the staff was, I think, make the case in their presentation that it is consistent with the way this land has been being developed and the direction it is going, that, they recommend that we approve this. But, I mean, we certainly have within our prerogative and power to agree or disagree with it based on our vote. And does that one house right there, is, in our minds, is that the block for us to say, nope, that's not a good use to have that be commercial because there's a house there?
Yeah, no,
or there's reason to believe there's going to be a housing development there because there's that one house.
Sure. I just, the question I'm trying to ask myself is the one you just asked. Right. That's definitely yes.
Yeah.
But do we also ask the question, do we need to know what's going to be there to protect the people on either side? I mean, that's the other question I guess I'm asking myself. Because we've done it in the past, and what makes sense.
If you mean what particular use in that whole category, then I'd say the answer is no to that. I mean, the answer to your question, can zoning, disapproving it to protect the neighbors, is it ever appropriate? Of course. I mean, the very idea about zoning is to ask the question, is it compatible with surrounding uses of property and what the long-range projected use of that property is? And if you're looking at both those things and you can answer, yes, it's consistent with what the long-range plan shows and surrounding uses of property, they're not always going to be 100% compatible, but what looking at surrounding uses and what the long-range plan shows, blending those together, if you can answer that, then it is appropriate to rezone property, and then you have to rely on your building standards and standards about commercial property, whatever the zoning is, to protect surrounding uses of property.
So if we don't know what's being built there, we can't ask ourselves that question, is it compatible? Because we don't have a clue.
But
the three things.
A couple things. I mean,
Exactly.
you have the setbacks and screening already developed within the ordinances that require a commercial builder, if that's developed commercially, to protect those surrounding areas, depending upon what is surrounding.
As well as landscaping, building materials.
Yeah, and we have actually changed some of those requirements, what can and cannot be added. We won't allow this because that won't be compatible, even though they fit in the same zone. Side by side, they don't fit. And so we've said, yeah, we can do it if we take out A, B, C, and D.
And we've done those with planned developments.
Right. And anyway, if you do that, there will be none of those, is what I'm saying. And you can't ask yourself, is this compatible with what's next door?
Because we've had it the other way, and I think this is the one example I can think of where we actually have looked to control the use by denying zoning, and that's putting a residential area within an industrial area.
Right.
Or what in our mind is an industrial area by use.
That's right.
in the plan, and we in fact denied.
We did it in Meadow Village as well. We voted that was,
yeah, right.
We did not believe that was the highest and best use of that property with that development, even though it was already an apartment that's been there for 40-something years. We voted that we did not believe that was the highest and best use of that property.
So that is not a good term for us to be using, highest and best use for zoning. That is not the appropriate inquiry.
We
That's a-
voted that we did not believe that that would be appropriate zoning for that land.
Exactly. But highest and best use is entirely different concept, and that's not a good.
What we tried to show you tonight through the different plan amendments is, does it conform or conflict with your future land use plan? Does it conform or conflict with what's planned for thoroughfares? And does it conform or conflict with what is the adequacy of public facilities? And it's an area that are all out near your major intersections of your major minor arterials, so that takes care of the thoroughfare. You tried to look at the future land use plan for those areas that were shown for whatever non-residential uses they were planned, be it the neighborhood service or the commercial areas. And then again with the utilities, we try to show you what is existing for water and sewer and what had been updated for. And I think those are the three criteria that you need to use when you look at not only the future land use plan amendment and the zoning case. And I think in all those instances, they work together, and that's why we tried to give that information to you.
Jonathan, can I ask one question also? Say this particular piece of property, the way they want it zoned, would allow a tattoo parlor or whatever, okay? But it's also some other things in that same deal that you know, and you got a house, okay? So if we said let's do it right now and we approved it, that zoning, then if they wanted to put that tattoo parlor there, they could, or whatever.
If you approve straight zoning.
You bet.
Yes.
I mean, so you never get to go back and say, well, I can't do that. We're not going to allow that because I know that's what you want to build there, and we can't protect the pieces. Although it says in that zoning, you can have that in there. So you never have an opportunity to protect each other. That's the
I agree with you.
problem I'm having with that.
But that's also the problem that I have, or as an observer, with saying, oh, I feel reassured because some guy gets up and says, I'm going to put a pet store there. And I'm looking at everything else in that list and thinking, he may not ever build that pet store, he may sell the property, and he may put the tattoo parlor. So I think you really have to look, if you're doing straight zoning, at all the uses that are allowed in that district and say, there's a potential for all of these, and hope that the controls we have on screening and where our appropriate locations for commercial will protect the surrounding property.
And we've asked that pet store operator to say, well, yes, we'll do that, but you cannot have this, this, and this.
Correct.
Okay, check mark, and we protected it.
I remember a Dollar General, they do. I remember a Dollar General plan development vote, which they didn't do their stucco on the one side. The question though, can we not?
Yeah, not yet, Tony. We're trying to find some.
Can we not, though, I mean, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm not asking with the answer already. Can we not approve a zoning for a piece of property, and can we not exclude some specific uses in that zoning?
You can do a planned development.
And when we can do that. I mean, if you said, you know what, there's this house right here, and we really don't want a liquor store right here. I guess it wouldn't matter in Temple, but we don't want a tattoo parlor or whatever we don't want. We can exclude those things and do that. You know, when we're asking for zoning. Right?
Yeah,
Through a PD.
Through a PD.
I think you can do that.
Yes.
With some caveats, you know. If it turns out that as a city, we never find a reason to allow a whatever, because we don't like that, but we've defined it through our comprehensive plan as an appropriate for a commercial district, but we never get around to actually allowing it, then we probably would have some problems. But
that is a way to help control what you're talking about.
Exactly, but if you don't know what's next to that or what that's going to be, what's compatible and what's not compatible, that was my question.
I think if you view, and there are lots of different zoning systems out there, we've got what we've got, but if you view, you know, the idea that you've got a spectrum from less intensive to more intensive and more restrictive to less restrictive, and so if it's commercial, has more potential to cause noise and problems for surrounding property than, say, GR does, you may find yourself in some cases not willing to go all the way to commercial, being more comfortable with GR, but they want something that's sort of in between, and that's, to me, that is an appropriate occasion to use a planned development, you know, where you say, I'm 95% there, but there are a few things in that category that I'm not comfortable with.
Right. We won't have an opportunity to do that if you say, and we make no other changes to that, it's done, and anything that falls under that category, and be built there.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a hypothetical that doesn't exist in this case by the example that we're using. I think you got to be light industrial to have a tattoo parlor. So, at which point, is there something within commercial that is bothering you right now that is real, other than the appearance of the building, that is an issue relative to not wanting a commercial district?
No, I just asked the question. My point is that once it's done, it can't be changed. Even if we think that tomorrow they build this or that and it's not compatible, it's gonna be built. And that's what we've been trying to get away from in protecting the neighbors, in protecting the landowner, and in this case, you may be okay and you may not be.
Well, but we know the wrecking yard will not be able to advance across the street because they are prohibited in this, so we protect them.
All right, that's fine.
One of the things I want to say, when I was on planning and zoning, we'd always go out and do a site visit. And if you look at that area, if you go back and put that picture up, one of the things is with the extension of 190, that's also a play here, I think, that needs to be brought in. Because if the back end of 190 takes in some of that wrecking yard is shrunk, and they can't expand it. There is a clause stating that wrecking yard cannot expand when it was bought and developed. So if you go out there and look at what is across, the comment I'm going to make is a chicken coop and one house, I don't think has to determine what else could be developed. I just want to say that to get that on the record. Are you following me, Russell?
Yeah, I follow you, but I mean,
well, I think the point's made.
My point is that once it's done, and if it doesn't fit later, then it's a done deal. And I'm sorry.
Okay. Nope, that's okay.
I think it's a good discussion. I mean, because it's something we're doing differently than we've been doing it, and it takes me a little bit longer to catch on.
Well, no, I don't know it's a matter of catching on. I mean, it does, even to me. I mean, that's why I asked the question earlier. It did seem a little different, but nonetheless, it's certainly permitted and allowed, and so this has been a good discussion, and probably a good discussion to kind of lead into the next year's work on the comprehensive plan for our group that we were about to approve in the next item. But if there's no further discussion, Mr. Graham, you want to make one further comment? Otherwise, we're going to public hearing.
Good. That's what I was going to.
All right. Okay. All right. So if there's no other comments or questions from the council, these items, again, item A and B, A being the modification of the South Temple Comprehensive Plan, and B, the zoning change request from agriculture to commercial, do require a public hearing. And so at this time, I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Doing great, sir. Welcome.
My name is Stephen Dowdy. I live at 1807 Indian Camp Trail in Coppers Cove. That's my mother's property there. I appreciate what you're saying, but on the right of us facing the property, that's all commercial now. On the other side of the house, no one's living in the house anymore. The only people are living in the trailer. That's commercial property. There's a wrecking yard there. Light industrial down here, whatever general retail for the John Deere store, and general retail all the way back down there. Also right down here, this is the Dodge and Loop going over to the interstate highway. That's developing. There's big industries going up out there. There's a big warehouse and stuff. I think the whole area is heading that way. And I appreciate what you're saying, but I agree with what they're saying too. The zoning is what controls that, not the ordinances for the zones are what control that, not this. But it's your decision. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Yeah, again, I'm not trying, if it's more profitable to sell it as commercial now or not, but also trying to protect not only your,
that's the main reason we're doing this.
Not only your property, but the properties next door, and we've had some issues, down the line, but
it's commercial on this side, commercial on this side.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%.
Well, what could I put there as agriculture?
As long as you brought that up. Did your realtor say that if you change it to commercial, it'll sell for a higher rate? Really? Okay.
I'm on to 81.
No, that's fine.
Sure,
I was just curious if that was the case.
I want to ask you one question. How long have your family owned that piece of property?
We owned it for 30 years, right? How long we owned the property? 72.
Okay.
And it was a nice place when we moved there. There were a lot of houses and stuff, and it's just slowly gotten more commercial. Yeah, that's it.
You did a good
Mr.
job.
Dowdy,
Well, thank you, I appreciate it.
very
Appreciate
much.
your time.
Appreciate you being here, sir. Anyone else wish to speak before the council on this item? Okay. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, any further comments or discussion? Is there a motion? Again, we can take A and B together if your pleasure.
I'd like to take A and B together, and I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion a second to approve 9A and B, A being the South Temple Comprehensive Plan change, and B being the zoning change from agriculture to commercial district. If there's no further discussion or questions, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Tara?
Aye.
Councilmember Linden?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Thank you very much, folks, for sitting through our discussion. Item number 10 is a resolution. Consider adopting a resolution creating the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee and appointing the committee members from different groups to collaborate with Kendi Keast Collaborative to the major update to the Temple Comprehensive Plan. Mr. Dolan?
Well, Mayor, at your meeting January 18th, you guys passed a resolution to hire Kendi Keast, and then at your most recent meeting, you appointed Jack Cruz as chair and John Keela as vice chair. And in the memorandum supplied to you separately, you have at least 23 groups that have come forward with names asking to be appointed to the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. It leaves about 8 remaining. We've tried our best to get all 31. Not included in the resolution this evening, but included in the write-up is the idea to appoint 3 persons at large, not necessarily associated with any particular group, board, or association. So we'd ask that you consider that. But we have received 22 out of the 31 responses, some as late as yesterday. And so we're trying to go forward to get the other 6, 7, or 8, but would like you to go forward through the appointment of the rest of the what is known as the advisory committee. When you look at the resolution, it does allow the council the opportunity to come back at a future meeting and appoint others. And so you don't have to try to name it all tonight. Once appointed, there is the initial kickoff meeting, which is on Tuesday, March the 27th, and the flyers are being distributed to area businesses today and tomorrow, announcing that meeting. And at that meeting, we'll also have the swearing in of the members officially, with Clydette coming to take care of that, and then also Jonathan will provide an overview with the Open Meetings Act requirements, because this advisory committee will be subject to that requirement. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. Again, that is the process that we have set in front of you this evening, and again, you've got at least 22, 23 names in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. The one comment I might make is it was suggested that Mr. Keela be considered not only as the vice chair, but to be the individual who's been working on the CIS, that he's got sufficient background and experience that rather than appointing another individual to represent in order to be bringing the point of view of the CIS there, that Mr. Keela be allowed to represent that point of view as well, and then he'd just be serving in the vice chair capacity. So that's just a suggestion that's been made, and I certainly concur with that. But if there's someone else that you have in mind that would fit that category, but we do have 3 at-large positions open. If any of the council or staff have suggestions of any other individuals for this evening to consider. Otherwise, I mean, fine cross-section of our community, very interested, capable individuals working on behalf of our city in a very, very important project for this community. Council, anybody else that you'd like to see in there? And I think everybody has the change that shows the city council representative would be Mr. Jeter, and the Temple Economic Development Corporation member would be Russell Schneider as a member of that board. So we have 2 council members that will be involved in this project. And if there are no other nominations or suggestions this evening to fill those at-large positions, I'll certainly entertain a motion to adopt those that we've previously had submitted to us as members of this, and certainly glad to read those names into the record if that's appropriate. Mr. Graham, is that necessary?
Well, if we can agree on this printed document, we just make that part of the record
Okay.
with those changes.
Okay, great.
Mr. Mayor, since Mr. Strider and Mr. Jeter are on this, I feel as though it's only appropriate that I make the motion to accept the proposed comprehensive plan for advisory committee, excuse me.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve those names who will be entered into the record as members, and they all come from different groups within our community representing all different interests, and we still have 3 positions that are available to us that can be named at a later date as we identify other individuals, or others might come forward and say they'd like to be a part of the process. So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion or additions to the list?
Yes, on the at-large appointees, I would like to make the recommendation that we call Miss Claudette Ensminger with those names. If we have anybody at large that would like to be on.
That's not part of the motion, right?
No, I'm just making.
Okay, I got you. All right, okay.
That's what she's going to ask you.
Yeah.
All right.
Claudette.
I thought you were adding Claudette.
And Claudette, what are you doing to me, girl?
It almost sounded like that.
I know, we call Claudette.
Oh, okay.
Okay, very good. All right. If there's no further discussion or scary comments like the Mayor Pro Tem made. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Howard.
Aye.
Councilmember Lehman.
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. And the final item on our agenda this evening is a board appointment to consider adopting a resolution appointing members of the following city boards and commissions. We have a member to appoint to the Building and Standards Commission, one alternative member to fill a term through March 1st of 2009. Recommended that Mr. Alan Brown with Brown Electric be appointed to that alternate slot. Is there a motion to accept that appointment?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Howard.
Aye.
Councilmember Lehman.
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our agenda for this evening. Thank you for your attendance and your participation. We are adjourned.